Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, we're digging into something every parent and educator has seen, and many kids feel really deeply, and that's stress. And not the I lost my pencil kind, but the kind that keeps kids up at night, makes school feel unbearable, and can erode self-confidence over time. We're talking about toxic stress, how it affects learning and behavior, and what we can do to help kids cope and thrive. Joining me today is someone who has been sounding the alarm on this topic and offering practical solutions for years, Dr. Jerome Schultz. Dr. Schultz is a clinical neuropsychologist, a longtime educator, a fellow expert at understood.org, and author of Nowhere to Hide, Why Kids with ADHD and LD Hate School and What We Can Do About It. His work has helped parents and professionals understand how stress derails learning and how to anchor kids in competence instead of fear. Join me in welcoming Dr. Schultz to the podcast.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Hello, Dr. Schultz. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, Dr. Wilson. Thanks for inviting me. This is a real treat to be on your podcast.
I'm so excited. We're kind of partners in our work at understood.org and also in our work as neuropsychologists. So this is really a real treat for me as well.
Great. Yeah, we do have parallel paths, I think.
We do. And, before we hit record, I said, that we're talking about stress today. It just feels like there's so much stress in the world right now. We're recording on April 25th, 2025. And maybe we can even start beginning by defining what stress is, what exactly it is. And then we can kind of move into how it affects our brains, learning, particularly students with learning and thinking differences.
That's a great place to start. I think it's really important to understand that stress is really a protective mechanism or our reaction to stress. Stress is like our radar for things going on in the environment. And there are things going on around us all the time. So if we encounter things that are stressful, full of stress, then our brain responds because it doesn't want us to be harmed by the stress. In prehistoric times and early human times, stress was a poisonous snake or a saber-toothed tiger or some enemy with a spear. And it's a little more sophisticated today. Stress appears in many forms, but the basic mechanism is the same. If you see a snake crawling across your path in the jungle, you need to be on alert. You need to say, oh my goodness. And then you have to, the parts of your brain that are really the thinking parts of your brain have to say, wait a minute, that's not a poisonous snake. I don't have to worry about that. I can even eat that one. So stress is the reaction our body and our brains have to things that are dangerous potentially dangerous in our environment. And if we didn't have stress, we'd be dead. And it's as simple as that. If we have too much stress, we'd be dead. So the trick is really coming up with a balance to that, because we want our brain to respond to not stop seeing the dangerous things in our environment, but we'll get into that. I mean, the problem is we have to teach kids how to understand the stress response and then what messages it's sending to the brain and how kids and parents can overcome or change those messages so that stress isn't toxic.
Yes. And that's really an important point. A couple things. One is that the brain wants to protect us from real danger. And you also have talked about tolerable stress, which is that I can handle this, and toxic stress, which you just mentioned. Maybe we can distinguish between those two things because, like you said, stress is all around us and not all of it is toxic.
Exactly right. And stress that's not toxic for some people can become toxic for other people. And it depends a lot on your experiences with stress and how you deal with it. If you deal with it successfully, then it gets smaller. The snake gets smaller, so to speak. So there's tolerable stress, the kind of stress we all live with every day. Bad things happen. One of the things that differentiate not so bad stress from toxic stress is that we have this feeling or this awareness that this is going to get better. And for a kid who's experiencing stress in school, that might be, well, this class is going to be over in 45 minutes, then I get to go to lunch with my friends. So that kind of stress, the kid says, okay, I'll just sit here and I'll behave in different ways, but I know this is going to end. Toxic stress is the kind of stress that happens when you encounter a situation that in reality or in your belief system isn't going to get better. It's going to get worse. So that tends to shut people down and become very debilitating. So there's a continuum of stress.
Yes. And that toxic stress can also be persistent. It can last for a long period of time in some cases. And that has the potential to really change the wiring of the brain.
Exactly right. And that's really an important way to look at it, because chronic and unabated stress is harmful. It does rewire the brain. It changes it. It puts it on high alert for future. It's still a survival mechanism, but it's rewiring it to be afraid of or on alert for everything. And if anything even smells like what really stressed you out, or looks like, or feels like, or if in your mind you think it's the same, you're going to be under chronic stress, and that's just debilitating. It's not only bad for your health. I mean, it's bad for your immune system. It's bad for your attitude about life, but it also shuts down the parts of your brain that are responsible for thinking and learning in a rational, successful way. That's when it's a real danger for kids and for adults.
Yeah. And I think that we both believe, based on the work that we do, that stress is really at the crux of so many challenges, learning challenges that kids face, or exacerbates those learning challenges, particularly because of what you just mentioned, that when you have this unabated stress that impacts the ability to access thinking, which is what kids need to access for learning every day.
Right. And it took me a long time to understand how powerful the impact of stress is on cognition. If we're doing neuropsychological evaluations in an office and we're sitting with a kid developing rapport or a good relationship, the kid settles down. The kid's not so anxious, and we give explanations for the tasks that we put before them to say, some parts of this are going to be pretty easy for you, and you're probably sure you're going to be able to handle it. And then it gets a little more difficult. And we're trying to figure out, when the task gets difficult, how you start to deal with it, what happens to you, what happens to your brain. So in a clinical situation, we don't see kids necessarily under a lot of stress, but their parents call us and say, my kid is freaking out over homework. I don't know what to do. So, and we like to say things like, that aren't very helpful, like, calm down, you need to relax.
That does not work.
It does not work. I always say, don't try to teach a person who's drowning how to swim, because it's like they're not there. They're looking for the way out. They're looking for the exit sign.
Yes. I mean, and that's interesting that you use that example, because I think I was watching a talk that you gave when you discussed, it's kind of the situation where support feels like pressure, which contributes to stress.
Yeah.
And the example you gave was a parent saying, I know you can do this. And the child is thinking, I know I can't do this.
Right. And that's a setup for kids too. And teachers do it, parents do it all the time. We say, we try to be comforting. We try to be encouraging. We say, I know you can do this. If I'm sitting down playing a piano piece and I'm just learning how to play piano, and my teacher says, I know you can do this, I'm saying, this is my third lesson. I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. So I'm saying, I don't really want to be here. I want to play trombone. That looks easier. So we're saying things to kids that we think will make them feel better, but it actually puts them under pressure. Even if we praise kids for doing something well, they're finally successful at something. We say, oh, what a great job. I'm so proud of you. First of all, the I'm so proud of you piece doesn't travel well, because unless you internalize that parental voice, you don't hear that all the time. You hear the kid saying to himself or herself, I can't do this. I feel stupid. I feel dumb. And that's not very healthy. But if we could read those thought bubbles above a kid's head when they're facing a task, and that's part of a strategy that I've developed, a very simple technique we'll get into in a little bit, I hope, about how to get kids to change what's in that thought bubble. Because if your perception is this work is too difficult for me, this work will be too difficult for you. And so there are different ways to approach that with kids. And I think I have what I think is a pretty simple technique that's very, very effective that costs no money. I'm not pitching anything here, but it just came to me in an epiphany. I started out as a special education teacher many, many years ago. I wish I were there now to go back and give myself this advice about what to say to kids. I mean, I've spent a lot of time working with kids who were resistant, who were really literally looking for the exit door, were fighting me at every turn, were being what some people would call oppositional. Some of them had earned the diagnosis of oppositional defiant disorder, when in fact the opposition was protective, the defiance was escape behavior, and they were being put in a situation daily where socially or academically or behaviorally they didn't feel competent or confident. We'd all run from that. And I didn't get that in the early years. I didn't get that as a parent. And now I know it, and I'm having to practice it with my grandkids who are.
And I think parents and teachers want the language. The example I gave, and you just said why it doesn't work. Parents want to know, what should I say? Teachers want to know, what should I say? And I think it's a perfect time to kind of walk us through the approach that you alluded to in terms of what parents can do in real life to support kids when they're experiencing some of these stress responses.
Yeah, I think it's a good segue to that. I think if you're a parent and you're dealing with your kid at home over homework, that's one category of things. The resistance and the opposition to other things around the house are a little bit different, but let's focus on the schoolwork part of it, the homework part of it, because kids spend a majority of their time in school or doing homework as opposed to other things. When a child looks at a task, whether it's a sheet of math problems or a page of written word or a writing assignment, they have a reaction to that. We all have a reaction to that. And sometimes the reaction is, wow, that's going to be really hard. Sometimes the reaction is, well, I can do that. I've done that before. That's not bad. Let me get into it. It's like in school, if a kid's going to art class and is pretty good at art, he or she might sit down in the art room and start drawing or creating things and feel very comfortable, not feel any stress, because their mindset is, I can do this. I've done this before. I enjoy it. It's pleasant. It's rewarding. When I finish it, people will look at it, will like it. I will like it. And I'm working in my can-do zone. But if a kid sits down at let's say a kid with dyslexia, has difficulty reading, sits down and is faced with a page of text, the likelihood for most kids that they look at that page of text and they see it as a challenge that in reality or in their own mind they can't overcome. That's their belief system. So if we give kids, if someone gave me an assignment printed in Russian, for example, I would say, there's no way I can do this. And so I'm not going to dig into it because there's no future in it. There's no hope. I really have to be taught Russian in order to do it. So when kids are facing a task that in their mind or in reality is too difficult, and that's really important, because if a kid thinks it's too difficult, their brain is already looking for that exit sign. So the technique that I like to share with parents and teachers is pretty simple. It's a 3-part model. One part is asking a kid to assess the difficulty level of what it is that I've put before you. And asking the simple question, I'm going to give you some work to do, whether it's homework or housework. How hard do you think this is? And I try to use a simple rating scale. Most kids have access to the use of one hand at least. And you know how you hold a hand up in front of your face and it's like, no way I'm going to do that. Show me the hand. I'm not going to do it. So I like to use a 5-point rating scale and teach kids how to use that. 5 means this is way too hard, right? That's just way too hard. I can't handle that. Well, I'm going to leave that last part out. That is way too hard. So you say, how difficult do you think this task is? It's a 5, says the kid. And the teacher or the parent can say, you have had work like this before. And the last time you did this, almost the exact same thing, but the words have changed. You said this was a 3. And for us, 3 is, for me and for parents and teachers, 3 is kind of work zone. And here's the file that I've kept, and here's the paper that we did last time, and here's the 3 you put up in the corner, which said you thought this was pretty okay. Today you're calling a similar assignment a 5. What's going on, And the kid may say, I'm tired. I'm hungry. I don't want to do this. I'm just saying that because I want to get out of it. But the idea of having kids rate the difficulty level is something that we do naturally when we face a new challenge in our adult lives. We get into a car for the first time and we're trying to learn how to drive or ride a bike or play golf or knit or whatever it is. Our first thing we do is assess the difficulty level of the tasks. So using that 5-fingered rating scale is a good way to do it. If a kid, on the other hand, holds up a thumbs up as a universal sign for it's okay, it's pretty good. So you say, how difficult is this? Thumbs up, that means like piece of cake, I can do this. The next thing you ask is, how able do you think you are to handle this work? So here's a piece of work. Even if a kid says that's a level 3 piece of work, that's supposed to be in my comfort zone based on what we've learned over the past weeks and months about this strategy. And you say, well, you said it was a 3 difficulty level. What's your ability level? And the kid says, my ability level is, the ability level then is a 5, meaning it's a challenging task, but I have a high ability level to do it. So you look at the difference between the perception of difficulty and the perception of my ability. In my world, the ideal combination is a 3-3 combination. It's just hard enough, and I have just enough skill to do this kind of thing. That's the zone most of us find ourselves in because we choose those environments. But if somebody says, uh-oh, something happened today, there was a fire in the kitchen, my boiler broke, whatever it is, all of a sudden the difficulty level of the task goes up, our competence level doesn't serve us well in those situations. That increases our stress level. So just to recap this very quickly, what's the difficulty level of this? How difficult is this piece of work, whether it's math, reading, so forth? And then what's your ability? But I want you to think of, so again, 3-3 is a perfect zone. I want you to think also, and your audience to think about a 5-5 task, meaning 5 means it's really difficult, but 5 on the other hand, literally, means I really believe I can do this. That's what I call the Navy SEAL combination. These men and women, they face the most difficult challenges any human being can imagine on the face of this earth, and they overcome them. So if you say to a Navy SEAL, I'm going to hold your head underwater for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then you're going to have to come up and kill the shark that's swimming behind you. The Navy SEAL, being trained at this, says, that's a 5-level difficulty task, but I have 5-level, high-level abilities to control this. So what we're trying to do is get kids to increase their ability level or their perception of their ability level when they're faced with hard situations. When I first started teaching in special education many years ago, my default setting with kids who were under stress was to find something easier for them to do. I just didn't know any better. I wasn't taught any. I reduced the difficulty level. And what a lot of kids, especially the intelligent, smart, capable kids, would say, that's baby work. You're making me look stupid. And I say, well, you said it was too hard. Let's make it a little easier. And what the answer should have been, yeah, it's hard, but how well do you think you can do this? And if the kid says, I can probably handle this. And if the kid says, I can't handle this, then you pull out that folder of previous work, which the kid has handled well, and say, this is not too far from that. Let's just, that feeling you had when you faced a 3 or 4 or 5-level difficulty task and you successfully completed it? Remember that feeling you have? Yeah. How did it feel? Good, positive, satisfying? Let's try to get that feeling back now by putting you in an assignment that matches the difficulty level with your current perception of your own ability level. I'm using a lot more language here than I would use with kids, but I want it to be simple.
Yeah. And that's helpful for parents to understand and educators as well, because I think the reaction that a lot of adults will have is that you want to reduce the stress. And maybe the way to reduce that is like, oh, you don't have to do it all. Or like you were saying, early on in your career as a special education teacher, that you give them easier work to do.
Yeah.
When what you really want to do is build their competence.
Right.
And confidence.
And if I'm sitting in front of a kid as a teacher or a parent and I've got an assignment there, which in my heart, I believe the kid can do because I've seen her do it before. I know she's capable of doing it. I might say, that looks overwhelming. That's like 20 pages of reading that you have to do tonight. Let's go to the first page. Just focus on the first page. Pick out 3 sentences on that page. Scan it for a minute. Pick out 3 sentences that you're sure you can read. Go over them silently in your head. And then when you're ready, read those 3 sentences to me. And what you're doing by doing that is doing what I call setting a competence anchor. You go back to a place where the mind, the kid, and the material are all matched. They're in sync. So the kid may say to you, that's silly, that's stupid, I've got 20 pages to read. And what you say, basing your approach on neuroscience, really, you say, you know that you've learned that when you're in a relaxed state of mind and you feel like you have competence to handle the material, you do better. So what we're doing by having you pick out the 3 sentences that you feel you're in charge of, it's trying to get your brain reset to that place, because I'm not going to close the book and not require you to read the 20 pages. I just know that if you're fighting it because your thought bubble is saying, well, that's too many pages, I can't do that, you're not going to get anywhere. Or I might say, how many pages more than 3 do you think you can read right now without my assistance or with a little assistance? And the kid says, I can read all of them. Well, great, bingo. The problem with the answer of that is if you get to page 5 or 6 and the kid starts to falter, the book closes, the kid shuts down. So I strategically say, how many pages more than 3 can you read? Because I want a baseline. I want the kid to be successful. And the kid says, all of them. I say, that's great. That's aspirational. That's something you want to be able to do. But let's say if you think you can do a little more than 3. How about 5 then? Let's do 5 and check in, see how you're feeling. So hopefully at 5 pages, this kid is cruising along, making a normal number of errors, but is really grooving on the material, liking the content, feeling good. I stop at page 5 and say, how you doing? What do you mean? And the kid will learn to know how you doing means how you feeling about the work. I thought it was going to be really hard, but it's not hard, and it's pretty easy, and I like it, and and then you ask questions like, would you like to read some more? Yeah. I mean, that's the answer you're looking for. You want the kid to keep going. Brain science shows us when the brain is being successful, it loves it. It remembers success, and it shies away from failure. And if you show a bunch of athletes a video of them being successful, that not only raises their endorphins and their brain chemicals that help them, but it also gives them a positive mindset about it, and they want to do it more. The brain says, let's go out there, let's do the high jump again.
I want that feeling again.
Yeah, exactly. So yes. It feeds on it. If you show an athlete, an Olympic athlete, a movie of them making a mistake, knocking a hurdle down, falling on the racetrack, losing a ball, it takes 3 successful experiences to wipe out that negative failure experience. And that means the brain is changing in response to it. The trouble with kids with special learning needs of whatever the kind, whether it's learning disabilities or ADHD or autism spectrum disorder, they experience failure more than they experience success, sometimes because the emotional reaction to it, sometimes because it's too difficult, but they've got this negative mindset. And so if you experience failure more than success, your brain is on high alert. The parts of your brain that protect you are saying, beware, beware, beware. Anything that smells like school, looks like school, tastes like school, get the heck out of there.
Yes. And it sounds like by building that competence anchor and by helping kids assess the difficulty, like you were saying, and then also assess their own ability to be able to complete a task and bring in things that they were able to do successfully. So showing them examples of their own success, you're actually rewiring their brain in that instance as well. Because again, the focus is on the positive and the positive experiences and also the endorphins that are being released when they're remembering those positive experiences and successes they've had.
Exactly, right, exactly. Athletic coaches show videotapes to athletes of them doing things successfully, and they point out to them why they were successful, how they held the bat or the club or whatever it might be. They also show them videotapes of them not being successful. Football teams review their I can't believe I'm talking about this. I know nothing about sports. I have a whole family that knows all about it, but for me, it's a foreign language. But I know this much, that if you look at tapes of yourself doing poorly, and there's a coach there to help you correct the error, and then you do it, and then you're videotaped doing it correctly, you're more likely to do the correct thing over and over and over again. So the feedback is really important. And the coach doesn't say, I really believe in you. I believe, I mean, that's important to do, but that's not enough. It's like, I believe in you, but if you choke up a little bit higher on the bat, you're going to hit the ball farther. So it's how you coach. It's not just being kind and nice to a kid or making things easier. The other thing I want to add to the formula is there's a kind of a third part to this. How difficult is it? How able are you to do it? And then you say to the kid, if you say this is a difficulty, a 5-level difficulty, and you don't have much ability to do it, we can't make your ability be greater, but how do we change the material so that and we don't get it down to a 1, we don't want to turn it into baby work, but how do we get it into a 3? So the kid may be looking at a full page of text and he says, I don't know, I'm not the special educator here, what should we do? And you say, how about we do it 1 sentence at a time? How about if we do it 2 math problems at a time, we stop and assess it so that the difficulty level or your perception of how difficult this is starts to change by virtue of your success. And then how hard is this? How able are you? And the third question you want to ask a lot of kids, especially teenagers, is how ready are you to do this? How willing are you? And the kid may say, it's pretty hard. I've got a lot of skill, but I don't want to do this now. I'm listening to music. I'm thinking about my friends at lunchtime. How about I get back to you later? I don't know. How's never? But the point is the kid has to be able to do the task, but then also willing to do the task then. So you may have a kid who just got off the school bus and he was hassled by a lot of other kids, or she's hungry and her stomach's growling. And she said, come on, I can do this stuff. I will do this stuff, but let me do it at 10 o'clock. It's 7 o'clock, 7:30, whatever, 8 o'clock. I can't do it now. And you say, okay, what do you want to do instead that's productive? Well, I want to go do my art. Okay, do your art. And let's make an appointment. At 10 o'clock, you come back for reading. It's paying respect to kids like we pay respect to each other, that maybe not now, Honey, I don't want to do dinner tonight. Well, when do you want to do dinner? I really never want to make dinner ever again. What if we order out tonight? Doesn't mean you won't ever make dinner again, but we can do something else that puts you in a state of mind that you're going to want to do it again. It's human nature.
Yeah, you're meeting them where they are, and exactly. Giving them what they need, because some kids do need a snack before they can get into work.
Yeah.
Right. They do need some downtime.
Yeah. Or I'm antsy. I have ADHD and I'm hyperactive and I'm smart enough to do this. The work is within my ability level, but I got to move. Okay. So teacher might say, how do we turn this exercise into something that allows you to move while you learn? Right. If we've got a poem, how do we bounce to the poem, to the meter of the poem, and things like that? How do you get up and walk around the room while you read? That's okay with me. How many times as a teacher, and I feel guilty about it, if I could do anything about my early years as a teacher, it would be go back and find all those kids and apologize for what I didn't know. And I hope they're doing well. And if they're listening to this, please, I'm sorry, but congratulations about having a good life, despite me.
One of the things that you said was, we talked about the stressors, and you talked about the example of the kid getting off the school bus. And it just made me think that kids also need more downtime. And it feels like we're in this faster paced lifestyle where it's go, 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 get off the bus, do this, get for practice, get all your stuff, do this. And there's also been, and you've talked about this, a decline in free play for students. So it feels like, do you feel like there's more stress now on kids than there has been in the past?
Absolutely. And there are a couple reasons for that. I think we live in a world where technology allows things to speed up. Things happen more quickly. So we get this sense, and we're not designed to deal with this. We're designed to, lumber around a forest and then we evolve slowly. But recently, in the past 20, 50 years, things have sped up. The world around us has sped up. So that's a big part of it. The other thing that's happened that's kind of I say insidious, is that curricula in school has become more and more difficult and more challenging. My daughter used to be a kindergarten teacher, and she said her first grade colleagues were getting mad at her. And I said, why? She said, well, I didn't get the kids reading by the end of kindergarten. And now being able to read in kindergarten is pretty much a universal standard. And it it flies in the face of knowledge we have about some kids could learn to read before kindergarten. Some kids learn to read in kindergarten. Most kids don't have brains that are mature enough to read really well until they're about 8, which is when things start to turn around or fall apart. And when learning disabilities really become more pronounced, because here you've got a young human brain that should be ready to learn biologically, and it's not in 3rd grade. And that's when a lot of the referrals come in for evaluations and for IEPs and things like that. So I think, we're under a lot of pressure, and teachers are under an incredible amount of pressure to deliver units of curriculum within a certain time and do it well and have kids do well on standardized tests, lest their performance as a teacher be questioned by the powers that be. I've done years and years of work consulting with schools and teachers dealing with their mental health. And that's one of the biggest things that's emerged from my work with teachers is they're saying, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how I can do this physically. I mean, I love teaching and I got in it because I love kids, but now the work is not so much about kids, but it's about the curriculum and how much I have to cover and what happens to me in my reviews if I don't. And teachers are getting sick. They're getting heart conditions. They're leaving the field early. People aren't going into the field because of that. So there's a lot of stress. And even though as teachers and as parents, we try to protect our kids from the stress, there's this trickle down stress. They know it. My puppy who's sitting next to me right now knows when I'm under stress. He runs and hides under the bed. Kids do the same thing. They do it in school. They do it at home. They try to leave the room. They try to get out of the situation. Absolutely, yes, there's more stress. And it's not, there's a lot of research that shows in schools that where kids were misbehaving and not learning really well, if they did meditation twice a day for 15 minutes, that their behavior improved, their academics improved, and their teachers had 15 minutes twice a day to either practice meditation with them or just turn things off a little bit to slow down. So if we know that about the human brain, we need to build in those, what I call oases oases of tranquility, those places of peace in the day. And just to have kids sit for a minute and close their eyes if it doesn't make them uncomfortable, put their heads down and think for a little bit, listen to some quiet music or let them choose the music that makes them relax, get their brains in a better state. You can live in a chronically stressful environment, and if you don't have breaks from it, it can become toxic unless you're this superhuman person or Navy SEAL kind of person. But we're not designed to do that either. So we really need to, and we should ask kids what they do on their own naturally to chill out, to feel better, to relax. And you say, well, okay, you can be that way for the rest of the day or the rest of the week. How many times do we hear that these kids are having a mental health day to stay home from school? Of course they are. And they should, but they shouldn't have to do that. They should have times during the day, these moments of tranquility, these moments of peace that don't take too long. And this isn't a religious thing or it's a spiritual thing. It's a physiological thing. We can't keep going and running on the treadmill all day long because you just fall off and then you shut down.
Yes. And I think those are really great strategies for reducing stress and also at the same time helping kids build resilience. And when parents can model a lot of these, these stress alleviating practices as well, and give kids permission to do that on their own.
And I would go a step beyond that. I would say not only model it and give kids permission, but engage kids as little human beings to come up with their own strategies for their own way to relax. Because when kids, whether it's an academic challenge or a physiological challenge like stress, when they create a world in which they feel more comfortable and competent and successful and peaceful, they're more likely to follow the strategies. Instead of a parent saying, well, did you do your meditation today? Did you take your nap? That's something you thought, that won't work for me. I can't. What do you want to do? I want to listen to hard rock music through my headsets at a level that's just below the threshold of hearing loss. And that'll chill me out. And I would say as a parent, how long do you need to do that? Next 2 days. No, you can't do that. That's just not okay. It's not okay for you, and you have a job to do. You have many jobs to do. But you're saying to me that music or whatever it might be helps you deal with stress and you're telling me it makes you into a better learner. So why not do that? Why not find that
Encourage
place?
that.
Practice that.
Dr. Schultz, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. It's been so helpful to hear the connection, between stress and things that are going on in our lives, how it impacts the brain, but also what parents and our listeners are looking for are strategies to help kids address it. And you've done that so beautifully with the examples you gave. If listeners want to learn more about you and your work, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
I think both you and I have done and do work with understood.org, a wonderful resource. If parents don't know about that, to go to u.org or understood.org, you'll find a site that's filled with practical, helpful strategies to support parents of kids with unique learning styles and learning needs, kids who learn and think differently. And if you put in my name in the search engine, Jerome Schultz or Dr. Schultz, Schultz, you'll probably come up with 20 or 30 articles or webinars that I've done that expand some of the things we've talked today about in the podcast. And you can kind of do a deep dive into the things that I think are meaningful and helpful to kids and parents.
Wonderful. And I'll be sure to put a link to that in the show notes as well. Thank you again for being here. Thank
you so much for inviting me. I love the chance to feel optimistic. I'm selfish about what can happen in the lives of kids. And I hope this helps kids feel more competent, more confident, and parents feel more successful in the work they're doing with their own kids.
I believe it will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Schultz. I think one of the takeaways for me is that when kids believe they cannot succeed, their brains go into survival mode. But when we help them connect with their own competence, we create space for confidence, growth, and learning. If you're listening and want to learn more, check out Dr. Schultz's book, Nowhere to Hide, and his articles on understood.org. We'll include those links in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.